Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and it's grand finals time at the Mythic Dungeon International. And if you'd like to support the program as well as the Arena World Championship, the proceeds from those Transmorpher Beacon and Horde Alliance fireworks toys will be going to the prize pools for the global finals at the end of this year. I'm Jack, and joining me for the grand finals right now, we've got Sloot, Nagura, and Sours here. And guys, this is pretty much an opposite effect of what we saw last week. Last week, Battle for Champion won in the upper finals, sent Team D down. Team D takes the grand finals. This week, Team D wins the upper finals, and Battle for Champion is going to be battling out, trying to even up the score here 2-2, Sours.
I think we could see it go 3-1.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, who knows? It's been very hit or miss for both of these teams, especially in Atal'Dazar, where we saw
which is a great way to start it off.
Such a fiesta from Team D in Atal'Dazar. It really kind of didn't make any sense that the dungeon went so poorly, or even that they won it when they did win it. So if they can clean up their routing, like they should be able to see, okay, what we did in Atal'Dazar yesterday, that's not the move. We've got to fix that today.
Who's taking this one, Sours? You said 3-1? Is it Team
D 2-0?
All right, Nagura.
I'm gonna go with Team D this time, but I'll say 2-1.
And Sloot?
I'll go with Battle for Champ.
Oh, I am shocked. He's making an opposite side of Nagura here.
Wow.
Whoever's wrong in this one, I can't wait to see.
It's all right.
I think I'll follow Sloot. Follow Sloot and follow suit here for Battle for Champion here. I'll get a good even split desk as we're looking at the comps and getting ready for that first game in Atal'Dazar. This is going to be the grand finals for the sweet host of points, taking the top teams to land in Atal'Dazar here.
Got ourselves a good old-fashioned hoedown in Tall Dagger here. Getting ready. You know, Nagura, we keep commenting on how these teams kind of pull some of the crabs on top of the Sand Queen at the beginning, so wouldn't be shocked to see that as long as they're kind of effectively cleaving it and, you know, nobody has the danger of dying. It's not really the end of the world. Yeah, they certainly don't need it, and Battle for Champion seems to agree with me as they are my pick going over into the Sand Queen here. Both teams grabbing some of these silk crabs, and immediately we see Bloodlust popped on both sides.
Yeah, we see the exact same pool coming out of both of those teams here while pulling the Bloodlust as well. Now, we've talked about this before, that if you pull the Bloodlust, if you use the Bloodlust at the very start, then you will not get optimal uptime on the Sand Queen, because she actually will cast her upheaval shortly, as we can see it happening on Battle for Champion side, and then she will not be attackable, so you lose a little bit of uptime of this Bloodlust on the boss.
Yeah, so a bit dangerous here too, as both teams actually pull a Vice Jaw as well. Vice Jaw, those crocs on the side that periodically do kind of a bite, a chomp on the tank that decreases your maximum health. So too many of those can spell disaster for one of the tanks, especially in this tyrannical setting on the Sand Queen. A lot of damage coming in here, and Long, as he dips below 10%, down to 3%, barely hanging on, Ab getting the healing necessary to make sure he does not proc that Bonsomni's bargain trinket. So team healthy finally, as the rest of the trash gets chiseled off. Sand Queen down to 58% in favor of Battle for Champion.
Yeah, so the scary thing about the Sand Queen on a tyrannical setting, and quaking on top of that too, are those drones that are spawning close to players out of those tan traps once in a while. Now those drones, whenever they die, they will actually buff the Sand Queen with a stacking rage debuff, basically increasing her damage done. As you see the upheaval almost killing Ab here. Now it can be dispelled off the Sand Queen by the Sooth from the rest of the Druid, but if she's burrowed and you kill the drones while she's burrowed, then of course she's not targetable and you can't dispel the enrage effect.
Yeah, something you certainly don't want to deal with, but not too much danger here for the warrior tank. Certainly deal with the melee. It's more about that upheaval that comes in. Now, any player with a kind of blink or quick leap ability, such as heroic leap, will be able to actually dodge that upheaval if you time it correctly. Team doing well here on Team D's side to spread out for said quaking and then group up the drones together as they kind of barrage on top of the tank, adding some of that nature damage over time to Team D. Upheaval once again casting on both sides of the team as we see the area on Long now. Long doesn't time it properly, and it's particularly dangerous for a tank to get hit by upheaval, not only because of the mass nature damage, but the boss does actually melee the active target. So if it's on the tank, she comes up and will melee the tank, only on the tank, along with that nature. So you can actually get gibbed quite easily as a tank.
Here we see Battle for Champ actually being a little bit ahead in boss percentage, not very much though, as you see Team D being close behind here. But Battle for Champ just dropping so low, as you see the tank almost dying, and both of the rogues proccing their cheat death here, as we had the drone spawning and the sandstorm come in.
Battle for Champion battling for their lives here as Sand Queen goes down 1% here, and they will be heading into the sewers, kind of getting sneakily out of that one, but unfortunately leaving the rogues in a particularly vulnerable state for the next 6 minutes as Ab goes down on the side of Team D here. Fortunately, they do kill off the boss, reaching the checkpoint here and having undeath, kind of just one death accrued on the board. So extra 5 seconds for them, but that could have been pretty disastrous if it was just a bit earlier into the fight.
Definitely, just barely not enough damage to skip this last upheaval, as she casted the upheaval on 1% HP. So just not having enough damage is costing them not only time because of the upheaval, but also one more death on Ab just going down right before that. As Battle for Champion already on their way to do the Shadow Meld skip, and then they're going to pull some stuff here in this next room.
Yeah, they want to make sure to get as many of the buffs in these cages as possible. Most teams don't really spend a lot of time on this particular floor. They try to get through it as quickly as possible, getting the buffs that they need, and then using that mass stealth and the sap's true CC availability to get right up to Jess Howlis' room, which is what we're seeing right now on the side of Team D. Battle for Champion, of course, is already up there dealing with those C speakers, interrupting as many Salt Blasts as possible, if not spell reflecting them. But Nagura, the most important cast here are definitely the Water Dome. Gotta get that interrupted.
Yeah, the Water Dome, if it goes through, will actually cast an Absorb Shield on everyone close by, and it's especially dangerous for these groups because they're both playing Alliance, of course. So there's no Blood Elves, meaning they can't dispel it with the offensive Blood Elf ratio, and they also don't have anything like a Demon Hunter or a Priest for a Mass Spell or something like that. So definitely crucial to make sure that they interrupted with any sort of single target interrupts or Ring of Peace or AoE stuns coming in from those teams.
Certainly a bit defensive here from Team D's Tank Long as he dips over to the side just to avoid some of the line of sight on those Salt Blasts. They do a fair bit of damage moving around the edge. They will spawn their first Reaping momentarily, whilst Battle for Champion has done just that as they drag it into the second of the two C speaker pulls right before Jess Howlis, as we can see right behind that wall awaits the second boss of the dungeon, looking to try and cleave everything down before aggroing on the boss. Certainly don't want your tank stunned during the 70% transition with a lot of those stacks getting up on the tank.
Yeah, Battle for Champ, while they deal with this Reaping Pack and this boss, they actually engage Jess Howlis here. So tank dropped very, very low on this pull. Now, it's very crucial for Jack to dispel the tank here, as he not only does have all those Reaping stacks, but also the Arsonist leaving behind this magic debuff, this dot doing a lot of damage too. As Jack is actually using that Tree of Life to make sure that he heals away this burst damage here, and Team D also engaging the boss fight. Yeah,
really well done here by Battle for Champion. I mean, that was quite sketchy in terms of damage. 36% on the board for them now for Trash, while Jess Howlis at 85% for Team D with 32% Trash on the board. So the two teams quite close together. At this point, the Trash doesn't really matter that much anymore, Nagura, because we do know at this point they're just going to run upstairs once Jess Howlis is dead and cannon everything down and deal with the rest of their trash.
Yeah, we see Team D on the other side on 70%, meaning they will proc the intermission phase here as we can see the smoke powder come out, meaning everyone is going to be stunned while Jess Howlis is attempting to open these prisoners, these cages on the side, you see the raiders coming out just because Jess Howlis is opening them. Now, once he's on the other side, once he open all of the cages, you also see Bobby coming out, and Bobby is kind of mirroring Jess Howlis' abilities. So there's a lot of interrupts needed to make sure that boss is interrupted, but also Bobby.
Yeah, of course, this is where Mythic Raiders end up in jail here. Fortunately, Nagura and I managed to break out to be able to cast this. Jess Howlis being interrupted in a moment here for the motivating cry, wanting to make sure not too many of these enraged buffs are spawned on the enemies, including Bobby as well. Now, the team needs to well coordinate not only the line of sight for the flashing daggers in a moment, but also interrupts on the Howling Fear, which come not only from Jess in just a moment, but Bobby will also run down the hall once the players came and just cast one of the fears there. You can line of sight that as well, so it shouldn't be too much danger for an all melee comp.
Yeah, definitely want to make sure that they line of sight properly. Sometimes the boss position is quite important, because if Bobby just runs off and kind of casts his fear somewhere else, which is too far away for any of the melees to interrupt, and Jess Howlis at the same time casting his flashing daggers, then it can't line of sight both of those abilities at the same time. This is why I don't really like the positioning of Team D and Battle for Champ here, but as long as it doesn't happen, they're still going to be safe. And of course, we also have cloaks and stuff like that to make sure they're safe.
Yeah, it should be just fine here. As Just Howlis 7% for Battle for Champion and 9% here for Team D, as both teams are looking to just momentarily complete the second boss encounter here. Insignificant amount of percent between the two. Actually, exactly the same amount of trash percent between the two teams. So Team D gained just a bit through that as they rush upstairs towards the third floor as desperately and quickly as possible, trying to get to those cannons. The real key to just melting through the rest of the large amount of trash that they have left.
Yeah, both teams not wasting any time here. As soon as Just Howlis goes down, they just run up. They don't care about the trash that they're pulling because they're going to shadow melt once they're on the top. Now, we saw the tricks come out of the rogues here on too long, and now he's going to pull this whole area. He's going to pull it up to the cannon part, and then we're going to see the... Just take a look at the trash percentage now. It's 37%. In a couple of seconds, we're going to be all the way up to 80% almost.
Yeah, I mean, Team D here starting to burn these enemies down like they were Night Elves in Teldrassil as they funnel through the doorway coming in, making sure well to line of sight the tank here long, kind of dipping around the corner, doesn't want any of the blaze casts from those flame casters coming in, and especially none of those frontal projectiles coming in as well from the Marines. So want to make sure to just kind of help filter those around the corner so that the, in this case, Mog has an easy time casting tricks of the trade on the tank, getting in the cannon, and just funneling everything together. But some of those casts do unfortunately get off on Mog and proc his cheat death.
Here we see one of the rogues, actually, as you can see from the shot now, on the right cannon, the other rogue is already there. He's stealth past these mobs here in the middle area, just went into the right cannon, and he's dealing with the trash over there. So simultaneously on the left cannon and the right cannon, just dealing with the trash. As I said, 82% trash on Team D side now. Just such a huge trash amount within just not even a minute, basically. Just so fast with this cannon area and just, you know, proccing 2 or almost 3 reaping waves within a couple of seconds.
Yeah, certainly making an egg yolk of this situation. Now, obviously a bit of lag here from our observers right now. The players are unaffected in their own region, but just a bit of spottiness back and forth here as we get through this match. The players unaffected, though, will be going along the dungeon as normal, in case anybody at home is wondering. Speaking of which, that, of course, does not prevent players from almost dying, as we see 1% on one of the rogues proccing that second cheat death, and does go down here for Team D. I think he went forward to the other cannon and perhaps didn't get that tricks of the trade off. Ab, of course, runs after him, getting ready to get that battle res off right away. 88%, 92 now for Team D. They have more than enough of the trash needed before advancing to Valyria, the third boss of the dungeon.
Yeah, they only have to deal with those 2 trash mobs here, and then they're going to be done. As we saw, the cannon almost shot the Windwalker here as he just barely rolled out of the shot in the very last second.
Be so lucky.
Battle for a Champ, on the other hand, also 90% trash. So both of these teams very close to one another now. Team D slightly ahead when it comes to trash percentage, but they have 3 deaths, while Battle for Champ has 0 deaths. So the time difference, 15 seconds, makes it so both teams are very close to one another.
Very close to one another, but our good friend Corghus, the final boss of the instance, will have something to say about the safety of these teams once they get to him. But first, we must get through Knight Captain Valyria here, the third boss of the dungeon. Quite an easy boss as long as you keep on top of the barrel placement, something that usually the responsibility falls on the healer and is back up the tank so that the rest of the DPS in the group can DPS her down. Now, you want to make sure you kind of move her to the opposite corner or sides of the room where the barrels are so that effectively the melee can sit there and DPS as much as possible. She is rather immobile at times, casting very frequently. So want to pre-position well so that you get max efficacy on your DPS.
Yeah, so the barrels spawn in the room randomly, basically. So sometimes you can get a little bit unlucky and have a lot of the barrels spawn in the middle of the room or in the area where you're standing. So you need to move a lot of the barrels, meaning that your healer and your tank or whoever is moving the barrels just loses more damage. So there's a slight DPS gain, of course, for having the healer only move a couple of them instead of having to move them all. But we see both Rasta Druids are actually doing a lot of damage, as we can see. App on Team D side actually beating the warrior tank.
Yeah, quite a bit of damage as Knight Captain Valyria here has a barrel laughs, casting Cinder Flame in various directions at one of the barrel. Huge frontal cone that will light them. Now, there are various mechanics on this fight that will ignite the barrels, making sure that you can't just stalk them in a corner. Technically, you can, but it requires a lot of micromanaging from the healer that is really just not worth it, as opposed to just letting some explode and going off to the side. The team's neck and neck in percent. Here's Battle for Champion is at 45% right now. Both of them actually hit 45% at the same time. Team D, those 3 deaths, very daunting for the team. 15 seconds that they will need to overcome on equivalent trash percent on both teams. So it's going to be really down to the wire here on Corghus.
It's all going to be about Corghus again. The last time we saw Dagor, we saw the teams have a lot of trouble with this boss. It can be a little bit of RNG involved with the boss's cast, on top of also having this quaking ability, which makes it so much more difficult for the healers to deal with these explosive bursts. And we see a different talent setup actually coming in from those Rasta Druids as well, as one of the Rasta Druids, Jack, is playing with Tree of Life, while the other Rasta Druid is playing with Cultivation. So that is something that might make the difference in the healing on the last boss here.
Yeah, and you know, it also makes the difference how many doubles they get as well. Yeah. So we'll see which RNG god favors which of the teams right now. 12% apiece on the teams, 10% now as they ruffle through the rest of Valyria. Now, there is a kind of two different strats coming in from the teams here. Only 4% trash remaining, so I'm expecting to see that they will skip the first 3 mobs, the Warden plus the 2 casters right after, and either skip the second round of Wardens and then deal with them after Corghus, or kill the second round of Wardens and then Shadow Meld it off and avoid the 5th Reaping. Nonetheless, Battle for Champion and Team D both heading out of the door here from Valyria's room and right up to Corghus' room as quickly as they can.
Yeah, both teams are so close to one another. Now, one thing to note is the cheat deaths. Battle for Champion has both cheat deaths available on their rogues, while Team D actually has cooldown on their cheat deaths on their side. Now, this is something that can definitely make or break it on this fight, because we talked about it all the time. Explosive bursts plus quaking, anything can happen, and there's a lot of burst damage coming out. So having a cheat deaths available to them can be an advantage here.
Team D masterfully killing both of the casters right now as they run upstairs right past the pre-crowd controlled Wardens. They Shadow Meld off the 5th Reaping Wave and get right on the action with Corghus, popping their Bloodlust and getting ready to deal with the final and definitely most dangerous boss of the dungeon. Battle for Champion not to be outdone, ahead of them by 4%. Their Bloodlust, excuse me, has already been popped as well. Team doing well here to avoid the lines on the ground. Don't want to get hit by that.
Unfortunately, Team D didn't manage to Shadow Meld all of the Reaping Souls. They do have 2 casters here, 2 Tormented Souls, but App actually doing a very good Typhoon, making sure that both of the souls are on top of the boss so they don't lose any sort of damage, just cleaving them down. But now it's all going to be about this RNG, about the double cast. Now, the one thing you want to watch out for here is the Dead Eye. The Dead Eye kind of resets the rotation of abilities, and if the boss casts Explosive Burst right after the Dead Eye, then it's going to be a double, and this is when it's going to be very dangerous and difficult for the healers to make sure the group stays alive, especially if you get a quaking on top of that.
Yeah, the quaking timings could be absolutely brutal for the teams. Certainly Battle for Champions still 5% ahead of Team D. At this pace, I mean, they're going to need to hope for a couple of unfortunate or unlucky deaths on the side of Battle for Champion to try and take this first game from under them. We've seen some very low percent wipes on the team coming in that could really cost them, but a lot of damage, a lot of doubles coming in for the teams. Just really unlucky as Mog goes quite low. I think he might actually proc his cheat death. We haven't seen the full debuff frame just yet, but more damage coming in for Battle for Champion, dipping well below 35%.
We saw Jack having to pop his tree form because they got a double plus quaking combination here. So a good usage of the tree form, making sure they save it here for these very dangerous moments, as we see on Team D side. App also having to pop his tranquility to make sure everyone is healthy from these explosive bursts. Take a look at the HPS from those 2 druids, right? We have 40k HPS at least from both those druids coming out. Just insane amount of damage on this boss.
Insane amount of damage, but the kind of gap between the teams is being maintained as Bonsami's Trinket does pop over on the Prot Warrior for Battle for Champion. I think he might have gotten clipped by the cross ignition. Really hard for the tanks to see in there, so won't have that available for a bit, but finally they managed to stabilize as the Tormented Soul on the bottom of the screen is still paralyzed. The Prot Warrior going down sub 10%. He does go down. The Windwalker goes down as well. Battle Reses are available. Jack immediately casts Rebirth on both targets. Cross ignition finally comes. Really lucky time for that cross ignition to hit for the team, allowing for Team D to catch up just a bit, but they're still 2% behind and 1 death behind.
Yeah, so they're 5 seconds behind at this point, and anything can really happen as we see those 2 deaths come out. Now, any sort of doubles with the healers struggling, running out of cooldowns, really. If you run out of healing cooldowns, getting more of those doubles, getting more quakings, this can get very dangerous here.
So Jack is casting potion right now
mana potion
to try and get that mana potion up, but it does so successfully in order to be able to heal the rest of the team. But so much damage going in as the tank goes down again. No battle res available for the team right now as they try to eke off the last 8%. Team D has pulled ahead at this point, 4% on the board for them, and it looks like they're going to sneak another win right under the nose of Battle for Champion to take that first game. And oh man, again, just Battle for Champion so close, outperforms the team, and just at the last second chokes.
Oh my god, his last
Jack,
boss.
you're choking too.
I know.
Wow.
Team D taking that game 1 from Atal'Dazar right out of the hands of Battle for Champion there. The repeat deaths. I'm shocked that they were even able to get the res off to be able to keep everybody alive after the 2 reses go off and be able to get everything back on track. And then another death happens there, Sours.
It's heartbreaking, really, for Battle for Champion at that point. Team D won the dungeon under kind of similar circumstances earlier, but this dungeon was so close throughout the entire dungeon. 7 seconds separated these teams on the Sand Queen. And going through the dungeon, 1 second between the teams on Jess, and then another like 2 seconds on Knight Captain Valyria. Absolutely insane. And if it wasn't for these couple of deaths that we happen to have for poor Battle for Champion on Overseer Corghus, tank goes down, Windwalker goes down a second later, and then you can't recover from that. And Team D, nobody died, and that's all you need to do to win. Is even though they did have 3 extra deaths on the 3rd boss, so it was okay. 15 seconds is really bad. Can't have that time lost. But if you don't have 3 deaths on the last boss when you're fighting it, that's how you win the dungeon.
That was simply incredible. And when we were talking about it, the potion of replenishment coming up on the side on them just to try to get any kind of resources they could. It really shows Nagura how draining of a fight that can be.
Most definitely, and I think the problem was for them that their tank just dropped low. He got hit by any sort of ability or didn't have his active mitigation up. He just somehow dropped low, and he had such a hard time healing his whole group or the damage dealers from the explosive burst and the quaking. If your tank drops low too, at some point you just run out of heals, right? And he ran out of mana too at the same time as he used that mana potion, and at some point it was just too much to heal.
Yeah, we need to take a little bit of a closer look at that last wipe there, and that was simply something that I was just baffled by here, Sours.
This is heartbreaking for poor Battle for Champion. Jax just, I guess he gets punched by the boss. They got the debuff on him from the knockback, and like there's no battle reses. They used battle reses a second ago, and not only did they use all their battle reses earlier, but both of the rogues use their defensive cooldowns to tank the boss, so now the rogues have no way to stay alive any longer, and it looks like, what is that? 1 melee brings a rogue down to 40% health, so 2 melees from Corghus was enough to kill the rogue, and you can't recover from that. And it's so hard to reset that boss, even if Team D were to wipe, because just running out of the room is going to stun you for 8 seconds.
And that Heartstopper Venom is definitely deadly, but I love that they both popped riposte, were both able to tank Corghus very quickly there, Salute, as they pretty much were able to get both reses off, and it looked very clean, but I'm not sure if they just got clipped by like some of the split fires or anything like that from Corghus that just brought the tank down, but he dropped ridiculously
Yeah, I'm not
quick.
really sure. The tank got chunked. You shouldn't be getting chunked that hard as a pro warrior tank in that fight, so maybe cross-ignition, I'm thinking. I mean, there's a, I always joke about it, but the truth is the camera is actually so rough on that fight in the little alcove where the tank is. I mean, it's really just right on the back of the tank's head, and it's kind of difficult to see where the lines, the dark zones of the cross-ignition are on the ground, so it's possible he just got clipped at the wrong time, along with the explosive round dot on him. It was just enough to finish him off. Certainly impressive recovery from the first 2 deaths, but the 3rd one just sealed the deal. I mean, that was it.
And well, this is not going to be it for the series, though, because we are going to be going into Game 2 on Atal'Dazar. So don't go anywhere, guys. We'll be going into the Game 2 right after this break. Team D is up 1 against Battle for Champion here in the grand finals for the Eastern region. And now we'll be moving on to Atal'Dazar here. One map that Sours, Team D has had very good time trial runs on, but as we've seen multiple times, time trials is definitely not everything.
That's right, and I want to talk about something that we've talked about, tilting and how that can affect some teams, but the opposite of tilting is called momentum, and I think Team D coming off that win is going to have good momentum going into this game. They should be able to breeze through it really well, and Atal'Dazar is a very easy map in comparison to stuff like Dagor, stuff like King's Rest, Shrine of the Storm. So as long as they can maintain that momentum through all of Atal'Dazar, execute all the pools nicely, then maybe we could even see this beautiful 15-18 time they were able to get out of time trials here in the tournament itself.
I mean, eyes are going to be on them on this one here. And Nagura, as we're looking at this, I mean, we have a pretty solid matchup for dungeons here. We have Atal'Dazar in this next one. Freehold if we go on to Game 3 here. Team D really looks like they want to be in that position to be the #1 team. They won last time. How are we feeling about this one?
Okay, so Atal'Dazar is definitely a dungeon we've seen Team D do really well on the last time around, though. I don't think we've seen him do it with these affixes, and we actually see the D kick coming by Team D.
She was just talking about
I was
this.
just waiting for it.
Insanely excited to see this.
but no Windwalker. So I think this is the reason why they haven't played it before, just because their Windwalker Monk is the one that plays the Unholy as well. Their Rogues, they're just kind of one-tricks. They only play Rogues and nothing else, really. So just missing out the Windwalker and this Ring of Peace might cost them too.
It's kind of a mirror situation from what we saw in the previous Atal series, right? We had Black Mamba running the Unholy DK.
Yeah, we're checking this out here as we go into Game 2. Battle for Champion needs this one to stay in the series against Team D.
Atal'Dazar, so a really aggressive pull off the bat here. I mean, we say this every time, should be no surprise coming up, but we've seen this pull, Nagura, come up just horribly for some teams. Things can go wrong very quickly here, especially if you miss some of those interrupts. Expecting double Bloodlust to be popped here in just a moment, and we see it light up on both sides as Team D in Battle for Champion. Really aggressive, getting those Augurs and the Confessors in. Gotta get the interrupts on those Mending Wards and the Bwonsamdi's Mantles, but Team D opting not to use the Stair for the Juggernaut charges.
Yeah, and this is a huge pull because of teaming, because you actually have multiple Confessors here in this pool. Now the Confessors constantly cast this spell, pretty much getting rid of any sort of CC. As you see, App actually going down on Team D side because of this Juggernaut charge. As you mentioned, we see Jack on the other side just standing on this ledge, making sure the Juggernaut cast doesn't go through, and they're finishing off the pool, while Team D having basically a full wipe coming in here, just because App is just kind of refusing to use this ledge and not getting rid of the charge.
The only thing that's getting finished off right here is Team D's health, as they almost have a full team wipe right now with 3 deaths. And I mean, that was just a silly play. Why would they not use that just kind of free support on the team? Team D, as aggressively as they can, trying to move down with this double sword pull onto the snap location. Long dipping quite low again as Ab kind of recollects himself after that wipe. Long just not able to get above that 20% threshold, and Ab just pumping so much healing into him. Both cheat death procs are gone from the Rogues. One of the Rogues had died earlier as well. Finally, the first reaping gets procced here as they head downstairs. Battle for Champion well ahead, has already started on Rozon and dealt with their first reaping wave as it comes down the stairs right now.
Okay, that was actually kind of a crazy pull coming out of Team D here, as they were snapping the first swords there, and then they pulled the triple Sky Screamer with the reaping and then jumped down to the boss. We see the triple Sky Screamers here. They need to make sure they interrupt all of them, but we saw the difficulty of the snapping here. If you snap the swords, they will not be jumping around and damaging your team, but they will be auto-attack, and he actually got eaten.
Oh no, Long goes down, gets grabbed by the boss there, and the Bwonsamdi Trinket procs as well because of the death. There is just threat running wild right now. They opt to run him up the stairs and reset him so they don't have a full wipe to the trash, but this is an absolute disaster right now as one of the Rogues is down, no battle res available. Not really sure why he's not releasing either, but finally managing to stabilize with some of the damage coming in from the remaining Rogue and the Unholy DK. One of the interrupts was missed, unfortunately, for the Fear, as the Sky Streamer runs around, hitting Long in the back. Meanwhile, I mean, just Sunny and Daisies here for Battle for Champion, 32% on Rozon. But, I mean, you know, Zyra and I talk about this all the time, Nagura. They just have to reset the boss entirely just to try and stay alive. This is, I mean, this is just horrible for Team D right now.
Yeah, this is a disaster, and we've been talking about momentum, right? Team D winning this first map, just very close against Battle for Champion. They should be having the momentum going into this game, and then they're making mistakes on the very first pull. They do the second pull, and they make mistakes again. So definitely very bad for Team D here, while Battle for Champion just playing everything so much cleaner. They might be doing a little bit less risky pulls, but that doesn't matter at this point because they're 0 deaths and they're about to kill Rozon. They're just so much ahead at this point.
Yeah, I mean, this is a dungeon as well where it's just these affixes are not very dangerous. You can be hyper aggressive, and Battle for Champion can certainly take a bit of a stroll here at this point. They're 6 deaths ahead of Team D. That's already 30 seconds plus an entire boss at this point because Rozon had to be reset for Team D and recycled. So Battle for Champion moving up to the triple Sky Screamer pull. Usually only one Sky Screamer for non-teaming affixes, but we do know there's more trash present in this dungeon that you also need to kill. Doing well to assign 1 melee per interrupt for the Sky Screamers as to not leak any of the fears that we saw kind of plague Team D earlier downstairs.
But yeah, one more time, I want to talk about this snapping of the swords here, which we've seen from Team D earlier. Now, it is good to snap them because they're all in the same spot. They're easy to DPS. They're not jumping around, not damaging any of your damage dealers or your healers because it can be very dangerous. But then again, they're just continually melee attacking your tank. And we saw how low Long Drop just almost going down just because of all the melee attacks coming out here. And Battle for Champion choosing just not to use those snap spots and just dealing with them normally. And now they're on their way to pull those Honor Guard and those Stalkers.
Yeah, Honor Guard is particularly dangerous here for BFC as they head head right up. Now, you got to be careful with the shield bearers. They will cast Bulwark of Juju, reducing all enemies' damage taken by 90% within that area. So important to kind of hard crowd control them. They can't be displaced. It won't work. So a bump from the ROP will not be enough from that Windwalker. Sorely going down from the death of the Honor Guard. Want to make sure to move out of that. Hits for an immense amount of nature damage. Rozon now 18% for Team D. I mean, you know, they were so ahead on time trials in Nagura, so if they're able to kind of pull it off, and if there's any team that's able to kind of pull it off and catch up because of their ridiculous time trial run, it is Team D, but certainly they've dug themselves quite the grave to get out of.
Maybe it's the DK just bringing them bad luck. Maybe they have to go back to the Windwalker. I take it all back. Now, Battle for Champion proccing their 40% Reaping Wave here as they use their Shadow Melt, and they're using their Shroud as well to get to Volcall here, their second boss fight, basically. Now, in phase 1, all you really have to do is make sure you kill those totems at the very same time. As we see, some of those Reaping Souls actually leak through, but it shouldn't be a big problem as phase 1 doesn't really do anything.
Yeah, no problem for them here. Reanimation Totems, got to keep a close eye on them. I think it's a 8 or 10 second cast once the first one dies, so you have that kind of window once one of the totems gets brought to 1% health to kill the remaining ones. A boss that's really not too dangerous even in phase 2. We do know most teams don't like using their Bloodlust here just because he has that aura that not only takes on players but damages themselves as well. Team D has now moved up to Volcall's Wing as well. Tree of Life has been popped here by Ab as they deal with this aggressive Honor Guard. You can just see his health getting rifled down compared to the rest of the mobs. They know how dangerous he is and how much damage he can deal to the rest of the group. Mob gets clipped there by one of the shield bashes coming in, if I'm not mistaken, as Long pops the shield wall and starts to kite down, but has to be careful not to get too far because the shield bashes and of course the rending tears from the Honor Guard will clip the closest melee if the tank is out of range when they're cast.
Yeah, so Battle for Champion, they must be having a very good time, especially mentality-wise, because they're probably watching the stream, right? They know the Team D has 6 staffs. They know that they had a wipe on Rozon. So in their mind, all they have to do is play the dungeon cleanly. Now, it doesn't really matter anymore just how risky their pulls are and how fast they are, because they're so far ahead. As long as they play their strategy cleanly, they're going to be winning. Now, Team D, on the other hand, they need to catch up. So they need to make sure they somehow have those bigger pulls, or they hope for Battle for Champion to mess something up.
Yeah, so they do the perfect second Reaping proc here with Team D as they kill all the mobs at the same time required to proc that last round. Actually, it was really only one mob as they ticked over that 40% to 41% mark on Team D, getting right to Volcall's room, right in the nitty-gritty of it, wasting no time and getting into that phase 1. Battle for Champion already dealt with Volcall and is heading downstairs to this very particularly dangerous trash bowl with 4 Stalkers because of the teaming. One of them does get sapped, 2 Shield Bearers and 2 Witch Doctors. So a lot of teams kind of pool up their resources and cooldowns here as just an early pull here goes wrong for the Prot Warrior on Battle for Champion, proccing that Bonsomdi Trinket right off the bat, already struggling, hovering around that 40-50% mark of health.
Yeah, we see one of the Witch Doctors almost dead already because they're making sure they're focusing it down. Instead of AoEing, they actually well, they do AoE, but they also try to focus single target those Hexers because they are so dangerous because of those casts. They do cast a Venom Blast constantly, which is a single target burst similar to the Reaping ranged mobs, and then you also have a Hex going through, which you also want to interrupt. So at some point you're just going to run out of interrupts, and that's why you want to focus them down so you don't have any random deaths from those Venom Blasts.
Good leg sweep coming in there to interrupt that last Bulwark of Juju coming from the Shield Bearer so that they can finish the mobs. Double pack here as they snap them over to the side. Long, excuse me, not Long, but rather the other Prot Warrior on Battle for Champion heads over, snaps the swords, including the 2 Sky Screamers, making sure that the melee have access for those interrupts and jumps right back on the main platform once the swords are dead, leaving the rest of the group quite safe from those jumps with the AoE cleave that they do. Third Reaping Wave should be proccing here in a moment for Battle for Champion, whilst Volcall still at 40% for Team D.
Yeah, these sword pulls are the one thing that actually prevents people from being very fast in this bridge area, because the sword packs, they're just very dangerous, especially when you have affixes that make them even worse, something like Rebus, for example. But these affixes, skittish and teaming, not really doing anything extra. So they are doing these double sword pulls and they're snapping them, making them just so fast on these bridge areas. As you can see, Team D, on the other hand, just down Volcall right now, so they still have a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah, I mean, they're only going down to that dangerous 8 pull in just a moment here. They have the same percent as Battle for Champion going to Volcall, so everything we just saw Battle for Champion do, Team D has to do somehow way faster, plus 30 seconds for the death, so it's going to take a lot for Team D to come back from this one. But, you know, Battle for Champion just has this kind of bad luck about them today. They keep having issues at the very end of the map and throwing it right back to Team D. So we'll see if they can break this curse as they hit their 70% mark at the bottom of the stairs, the Fire Mask Gauntlet leading up to Priestess Alun'za's room.
Yeah, so they have to deal with this trash pack, and I'm pretty sure they want to have their Bloodlust ready for the Priestess Alun'za's room, because what we've seen from teams so far is that they do this huge pull where they just pull the whole room on top of each other, and they kind of want their Bloodlust ready there, as there's still a 35 seconds cooldown, but it should be ready as soon as this pack goes down.
Battle for Champion now 71%. Yeah, just teetering on the edge of that pack. I don't think they'll proc it to 80% though. Should be about 78, 79, unless these 4 mobs I'm miscounting. Could be possible, but they do head up the stairs right now. 76% on the board, 78 in just a moment from that final mob. They will have access, of course, to the Augur and 1 Juggernaut on the side, along with the 2 Soul Priestesses in either pool. Now we've seen a variety of types of pulls coming in here. The safer strategies to kind of do only a couple of mobs, proc the 4th Reaping, and then take that onto the trash. But they are doing the more aggressive version of this, where they pull everything together and will deal with the 4th Reaping Wave on top of whatever remnants exist with this trash. They don't even use the Bloodlust either. They're quite confident that they're just able to melt everything here, likely saving the Bloodlust for the 4th Reaping Wave that they'll pull into the boss.
It is actually pretty risky just not using the Bloodlust here, as they proc the 80% Reaping Wave, and they could be pulling it into the boss, but that's just craziness at that point, because there's just so many things going on at the very same time, as you have to deal with all those casts, with the Reaping mobs, with the Juggernauts. There's just so many things happening at the same time that I don't think they also want to be engaging the boss fight on top of that.
And not to mention the tank does not have that Bonsomni's Bargain available. Ab dipping sub 10% here with Team D on their 3rd Reaping Wave. If they've aggressively pulled it over to the bottom of the stairs at Priestess Alun'za's area, they know they're behind at this point, so they might need to play outside of that comfort zone, getting as many interrupts as they can on these Skyscreamers. Don't want another disaster scenario with that AoE fear going out. Battle for Champion has well dealt with everything, cleaned it all up, still has the Bloodlust available, not popping it. I guess they will be saving it for the final boss, Yazma, but Priestess Alun'za now at 82% as the first transfusion is about to hit.
Yeah, if Team D wants to actually catch up here, they need to pull this room with the boss. I don't think there's any other way for them to catch up, so they just need to go in, just pull everything on top, just kind of Bloodlust, because Battle for Champion, they're 95% on trash. They're about to kill Priestess Alun'za, because she kind of kills herself with the transfusion coming out. And we see them also pulling this left trash back here on top of the boss to get the last few percentage that they need before they go into the last boss fight.
Team D is doing the more modest pull of what we were talking about. They're actually looking to proc their 4th Reaping Wave and then drag that into the trash, rather than procking the 4th Reaping Wave with the massive trash pull. That Battle for Champion pulled off without an Unholy DK, so not working in favor of Team D here as a big hit comes in. Unfortunately, if I'm not mistaken, from the Juggernaut charging in. Augur as well getting some cast of that Fireball off, finally getting the interrupts as Mog Dip's quite low, and Tree of Life already being busted out just a bit early there.
Yeah, so they did pull the boss here. So they're pulling this huge pull with the boss plus Reaping. So it is an insane pull coming out. And you gotta watch out for the DK damage here on Team D side, as you're probably gonna see an insane amount of DPS coming out of it, as you're not actually using their Bloodlust either. I'm not sure what it is with both of those teams just not using this Bloodlust for the huge pull. They're probably going to save it for the last boss.
But I mean, let's not forget about the Rogues too. The Rogues are sustaining 300 to 350 K DPS as well. So absolutely annihilate and melt everything here as Priestess Alun'za is getting her first transfusion in. But Battle for Champion doesn't care. They are well ahead now on their way to Yazma, the final boss. They have their Bloodlust available. 2% trash left on the board for them. Only 1 cheat death available for the Rogues, though that shouldn't be a concern, as the Bonsomni's Bargain Trinket should be available for their Warrior tank soon enough. Math Stealth goes up the stairs. We have a pull on the Skyscreamer, as is commonly seen. It will be paralyzed on the side of the room with Yazma while they first deal with the boss and then combine it together at the end for the perfect storm of tying the series 1-1.
Yeah, I actually like this Skyscreamer pull here by Battle for Champion. They were waiting until the DPS were passed, and then Jack plus the tank were pulling the Skyscreamer to make sure the DPS don't get in combat, because if they get in combat, they have to use their potion very early unless they want to use it in combat. So if they pull it this way, they can actually get 2 potions off. So very well done by Battle for Champion. Also using the Bloodlust here for Yazma, for the single target boss. So it's definitely their game to win here, as Team D just about to kill Alun'za now. So they're just very far behind at this point. Battle for Champion, I don't think there's anything really going to go wrong on this boss here, because all you really have to do is make sure you deal with the spiders properly.
If there's one team that can find a way to have something wrong happen at the end of the dungeon based on today's series, it is Battle for Champion, but looking really solid here. 45% on the board for Yazma. The final Sky Screamer still lingering in the opposite corner of where the players are right now, just waiting to be broken and interrupted so that they can combine everything together for the final Reaping Wave. That, of course, they will skip because the last boss of the dungeon will also be dead. 35%, finally they pick up the Sky Screamer. Everybody's making sure to interrupt that Sky Screamer. Don't want to spot fear, whilst Team D is dealing with their final Reaping pack in the middle of the room and looking to skip it by running up the stairs. Yazma now 20%.
Yeah, so I do think the Team D strategy here that they're shown is actually in theory faster than Battle for Champions, but because of all the mistakes coming in, Battle for Champion, Zero Dash just being so consistent and just making sure they win this first dungeon here as they kill the Sky Screamer off, and also Yazma to get the 100% plus the last boss kill here.
So finally, Battle for Champion at 5% on Yazma right now. No problems with the fear, no problems with the damage coming in, as they do have a perfect run and tie up the series 1-1. But, you know, I agree with you, Nagura. Team D, if they didn't have a catastrophe at the start of the dungeon, that pull on Priestess Alun'za was just really aggressive and probably would have put them ahead.
It very much could have, and thankfully that fear on the side of Battle for Champion, it didn't sink their chances there, because it was almost like poetic, as you mentioned. If anything would happen wrong in last boss, it would be Battle for Champion there. So thankfully they got feared away from all the other spiders there, and Sour's very good performance by BFC.
Yeah, I was hoping for the 2-0, but Team D let me down. We said that, okay, there's no way you can possibly wipe to the first pool. And they're just like, okay, we're not going to stand on the ledge. We're not going to abuse the mob pathing.
But why?
And then it just started out so poorly for them. And they had so much momentum, I thought, going into the series. But when you wipe on the first pool of a dungeon with momentum, you lose that momentum. Team Dinosaur started off with a prehistoric way of wiping in this dungeon. Getting eaten by Rozon and having to reset the bosses. Something that you really can't have happen, especially not in the grand finals on a match that could be the grand finals for you. But Battle for Champion, they weren't having any of it. They want to be the champions here. They cleaned everything out perfectly, no issue at all on any of the bosses. They finished the entire dungeon in less than 15 minutes, a blazingly fast time out of these guys, really well executed.
Yeah, it was incredibly impressive, and that kind of shows that they're ready to be able to play on that kind of world stage here. I mean, Atal'Dazar's in one dungeon we've seen so many times, actually from Time Trial 1, where people are putting up impressive times. But let's talk about the first pull on the side of Team D there. That was something that, you know, has been so avoidable, and like, why would they not do that there?
Yeah, this pull really is a science now, I feel. You just have to go stand on the ledge. It's just off the camera. But instead, ABB is just hanging out over there, and he gets double Juggernaut charged, and that just does way too much damage. And then once the healer's down, nobody else can really do anything. And then everybody else starts to die. They're able to clean up this pool, so they don't lose like too much time with this. Oh, you know, it's 15 seconds on the clock. You got a little bit slower because people were dying, so it's not like a huge loss. But having those deaths doesn't put a team in a good place. And then the guy got eaten by a dinosaur just a little bit later, so something went wrong there.
I'm not really sure what you'd be expecting either when you're having 4 Juggernauts in one pull and expecting to be able to dodge all of them throughout. I mean, you might have been able to have, you know, some kind of pet or something like that from the DK be able to be up, but then there goes all of your damage or something like that. So it just seemed a little lazy on their part.
I mean, I guess, but, you know, they had such a dominant time in time trials, and it's clearly something they practiced that it just worked for them for some reason. And but it's still very weird why they wouldn't take the safety net. It's not like there was any advantage coming out of the Resto Druid not jumping up on the stairs, outside of the laziness of moving an extra 30 yards to the stairwell. So, oh well, cost them.
Unfortunately, and it cost them the potential to 2-0 in this series. So when we come back from this break, we will be seeing Game 3 in Freehold between Battle for Champion and the name just completely Team D. Thank you so much. The series is tied up 1-1 as we enter the final game in the grand finals to determine whether Team D or Battle for Champion. I love it. I love it. I love it. I'm Jack, and joining me on the desk right now, we've got Sloot, Nagura, and Sours here for all the action as we go into Freehold. Sloot, a lot of dangers in here, a lot of threats, especially on the tank.
Yeah, I mean, we have, just to double check, so I screwed up myself, Raging Bolstering. I mean, the end of these mass pulls is just such a trash-rich dungeon. You have Raging on top of it, so 100% increased damage on mobs below 30%, and then you get Bolstering on top of it. It could be an absolute nightmare. We've already seen it be a nightmare for tanks, but, I mean, if there's any team, once again, that could pull it off, it's Team D. But, Sours, I already see you gesturing towards the screen. You know, you said that last dungeon too, man. How did that work out?
Maybe they'll just wipe on the first pull again, and then nothing will matter, and Battle for Champion will ride it out to victory.
You're like the greatest optimist. It's ironic.
I mean,
man, the optimism flows.
I believe in the boys. I wanted the 2-0, but 2-1's still possible for other side. I think Team D can still do it. You know, it's going to be
Question mark?
They went back to the Windwalker. Maybe Nagura was right. The Death Knight is not working out for them in the current meta or just in the dungeons in general.
It's just a bad luck, really.
Bad luck on the
Right, death in the wrong direction.
So you're saying that your picks for Unholy Death Knight are just bad luck, Nagura?
It's not my picks, their picks, okay?
Oh,
Don't blame me on that one.
I think we could here as we enter the final game of the night to determine whether Team D or Battle for Champion will be our champions.
Nagura, it's finally down to the wire. Are you right or am I right on who's going to take this 2-1? Let's go Battle for Champion, hashtag Team Salute. As a Battle for Champion, both teams right out the get-go, 9 mob pull here. Have to be careful as before with that Enforcer. A lot more HP on that compared to the other mobs, and with Bolstering on the menu right now, you do not want to have an over-bolstered Enforcer chasing your tank.
Yeah, Bolstering not only is very dangerous for the team and the tank specifically, but it also just costs so much time to DPS this extra HP that they're gaining from the Bolstering stacks. As you see, Team D actually bolstering those Enforcers and the Masters quite a bit, so they have to make sure that they're cutting them properly and deal with the extra HP that they're gaining, while Battle for Champion dealing with this pull definitely a little bit better. Now, Team D, we've seen them play Freehold before, and they were so much faster than Buff Warrior or Rogue, but Battle for Champion seems like they're even faster than Team D at this point.
Yeah, Battle for Champion rather aggressively finishing off that pack and using one of their Strauss to get right in the face of this double Enforcer, double Mastiff pull right here. Now, the Mastiff themselves as well enraged, doing a massive amount of damage when they get quite low, but you can, of course, soothe that off every 10 seconds in the form of the Resto Druid. But, you know, there are 4 really high priority targets here in terms of the damage they do, so they opt to kind of help peel off of the tank with that Ring of Peace and just not get too much damage intake as the Prot Warrior dips in and out just for a couple of extra Thunderclaps and Shield Slams to help with the damage. But you don't want to expend too many defensives too early, because we're going to have, once again, the combo we all know about Nagura, first Reaping plus the first boss.
Yeah, so Reaping on top of the first boss, which we've seen from almost all of the teams come out here, also using the Bloodlust here as well, which we will see on Battle for Champion side here. Now, in this very first phase, the boss is not too dangerous, but you can get very unlucky with the shots, as while he is riding this bird, he actually shoots random players, and it can be the same player getting shot multiple times in a row. And in a tyrannical setting like that, and on top of having those Reaping mobs casting the abilities, the Grave Bolts, it can be dangerous.
Very dangerous as the green swirlies come back down. A lot of damage going in on the Windwalkers. He's finally managed to get healed above that 15% that he dipped to. Sky Captain Craig at 76% for Battle for Champion as they have 8 seconds left on their Bloodlust. Getting ready in a moment here to dismount as they reach the second phase of the fight at around 75%. Will dismount from the Parrot, and you can see that the Resto Druid has run off screen, pouring some of those Wraths into the boss, whatever they can to help with the damage, as the Parrot will now run around kind of pooping on the closest proximity player to the Parrot and diving through the battlefield once in a while, whilst the melee does really well to make sure they spread out, because, I mean, outside of the poop on the ground, that frontal, the Fire Blast frontal that does just immense amount of damage, has one-shot potential. We just see the Rogue get to 18% from one hit there.
Yeah, you actually gotta watch out for the positioning here from the tanks. If you compare the position from Battle for Champs tank versus a Team D tank, Team D is in this very spot where we saw a reset coming out from another team early, because he got hit by one of those birds, and the bird not only does it do damage to you if you get hit by it, but it also knocks you back. And we know as soon as this boss steps a foot outside of the arena, he will immediately reset. So I like the position of Battle of Champion here better, because in case their tank gets hit, he's definitely not going to get knocked out of the arena. While on Team D side, if Lone gets hit, he is going to be out of the arena and the boss is going to reset.
Yeah, so good communication required from the players there, just in case there's a threat from the Parrot from the opposite side of the arena, screeching through the middle. But 16% separating these two teams from Battle for Champion right now. Battle for Champion Champion in the lead, of course, over Team D, as some of the poop starts raining down on the melee camp, making it quite difficult to move. Certainly risking that the powder shot, the bursting powder shot, hits multiple melee members. Already does such lethal massive damage as the parrot swoons on in, very close to the melee pack there for Team D, but they do manage to move by it. Umunk moving out of the poop and getting hit by that frontal too. Yeah, this actually makes me really nervous, Nigura. Seeing the poop go down at the same time as the frontal comes in is just one-shot potential written all over it.
Definitely. Of course, we see all of the rogues still have their cheat death available to them, so they do have this extra cooldown available in case something like that happens, where you have the poop spawn and the shot at the very same time. But Battle for Champ killing the spells quite a bit faster compared to Team D that are still on 16%. And now Battle for Champion are going to go ahead and use this route to make sure they're skipping this Enforcer here.
So right past the Enforcer, they go across the bridge and into the second boss's area. Now, of course, a bit of an open dungeon. You can't kill any of the next 3 bosses in which order you want. Sometimes we see Trothak first. Sometimes we see the Council of Captains. Been quite popular today. Unfortunately, cheat death proc here from Mog on the side of Sky Captain Craig with Team D just at the last 5%. So not going to have that available for 6 minutes now. But Battle for Champion is just about to say, pretty popular that we've seen the second round of Reaping be pulled into the Captain pack. Eudora, we know, is not active this week, so a fair bit easier of a fight with Tyrannical on the board for these two teams.
Yeah, the problem with the Tyrannical in this dungeon and bolstering is that he can't really make up a lot of time on trash, just because he can't pull trash on top of the boss, which we've seen European teams do a lot if they have this rotation because of the brews that buff you if you get haste or a crit. So very efficient to pull trash on top of it, but of course you can't do that if you have a bolstering affix like we see for the eastern region here. So they have to do everything a little bit slower, make sure they're pulling mobs that are equal in HP, and if they pull a mob that has a lot more HP than the rest of them, they need to make sure that they focus targeted a lot.
So I actually got disoriented for a second with where Team D went. They went up to the left and pulled the Oarsman on the left, so not something that you typically see. Ab is already gone, far gone here, already started the event for Trothak, so perhaps we're going to see while Team D's time was so dominant in time trials here in a moment as they look to finish off the last of these raging mobs. There's no healer present here right now for the two teams, so having a good bit of trust in Long that he survives and a bit of off healing there from Umong as the Mass Stealth finally comes in and they head over likely to Trothak's area, I want to say, because the event started. They get their brews picked up, so the captains have spawned for them. Any boss is open to them now.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that both of those teams are actually doing very, very similar pulls here, as they both pulled these Oatsmen on top, as you said, which you didn't really see before. So maybe there's something going on between those two teams. Maybe they were discussing their strategies a little bit from the time trial dungeon here in Freehold, as they really just have the exact same pulls coming out so far. Battle for Champion, of course, being a little bit faster than Team D because of the lost time from the very first pull. And here's where you can really see how important it is to play bolstering efficiently, because, as I said, both of those teams did the exact same pulls, but Battle for Champ ahead in trash and already pulling the boss just because they handled the bolstering more efficiently.
Pulling the boss and trying to deal well with these brews coming down. Certainly not only the key to this boss, but with anything else pulled on top of the boss, you want to benefit from those buff brews, either the haste or the crit, depending what the barkeep back there decides to send out. Now, there's also a bad brew, as we know, that gives you a fairly substantial nature damage over time effect that you can actually redirect back into the bosses by positioning them there. So certainly up to the tank to get that solid positioning to avoid the bosses getting buffed, but also wanting the bosses to get debuffed. Very key to the fight. Team D following suit as well, with about 70% average between the two bosses, as they have dragged their second Reaping into it and cleaved it down pretty efficiently. And you know what, Nigura, certainly not too far behind, but that 11% trash difference might be pretty big in the long run.
Definitely. I think 11% difference is going to make or break it later on, as of course both of those teams do not have their Bloodlust ready, as they used it on the first boss. Now, with the Bloodlust usage, we have seen a couple of different things here in this bolstering affix, because in the western region, without the bolstering, we've seen teams just save it for the very last boss because they want to pull trash on top of the last boss. But because they can't do that with the bolstering affix, we've seen some teams just use it on Trothak or use it on another boss, or even use it on trash too.
So Team D is actually largely caught up on this boss right now compared to Battle for Champion, outside of the 11% separating them. Captain Jolly dipping sub 20%, Raoul at 25 for Battle for Champion, whilst 20% apiece for Team D, doing an excellent job to equally cleave them down. Something that we always tote that we want to see, these max DPS efficient strats, even at the cost of some mechanical difficulty or stress on the healer. Not the most dangerous combination, as we mentioned earlier, as Captain Eudora is actually a friendly this week, so she'll help to periodically stun some of them. actually, no, the bruise will come down and help the members right now. So Eudora, no powder shots on the team as a result. Log dipping just a bit low as he gets that final brew, trying to finish off these two bosses. Battle for Champion, finishing them at about the same time as they get ready to move forward, but it looks like they pulled some extra trash with Harpooners on top of the bosses right as the bosses are about to die, trying to be as efficient as possible here.
Yeah, I like this a lot by Battle for Champion here, as they still get the buff from the boss, from the bruise, and they didn't bolster the boss, of course, because they just pulled it the very last second, and they made sure that they finish off the boss before they do the trash. So I really like this from Battle for Champion, as Team D is doing a pretty huge pull as they pulled the patrol with the right pack, which we've seen them do beforehand as well. Now, on these kind of pulls, you want to make sure that you save here to see for the very end, once the mobs are raging and bolstering each other, as we can see the Ring of Peace coming out just now.
Yeah, that raging is absolutely lethal for the tank. You can just see how hard they're getting chunked. Even a warrior tank with how powerful block is for a mitigated incoming physical damage that's blockable. I mean, just want to just play it safe, not have that cheat death trinket proc out of tune, and they rush right in to Trothak's room here in just a moment. As long as clipped on the way in, just a bit unexpectedly, I suppose, just snapped that damage from the mobs in right away, getting down to about 20% health, but Ab manages to heal him up as they start to kind of backpedal them in. Shield wall does come up from long, won't have that available again for a while, so he's getting that damage reduction in for the mobs right now, but it's faded well before they reach that enrage once again, and they did just use that Ring of Peace, so it's not available for just a bit more time. Battle for Champion using their own Ring of Peace on the right side here, fairly substantial pull. A lot of mobs starting to rage right now, along with the third Reaping Wave on top of this.
Yeah, so Team D is still just a little bit behind. Maybe just, as I said, the inefficiency compared to Battle for Champ with the bolstering. Even if you don't die, because both of those teams had a clean run so far. They have 0 deaths on both sides. But no matter your strategy, no matter how good your route is, if you're going to bolster those mobs and you have your damage dealers, they need to do so much more damage just because inefficient bolstering management, then you're just going to need so much more time, as Team D is engaging Ludwig now, while Battle for Champion already has around 70% HP.
Ludwig von Tortolan here for Team D, as well as for Battle for Champion. Well into the boss here. Once again, about 8% trash separating the two teams right now. Trash that could be fairly easy made up, depending on the efficiency if they pull and what they do with their downtime here. Not only on Ludwig von Tortolan, but as soon as he dies as well, there's about 25 seconds or so until Trothak will come to fruition and spawn in the arena as well. Little clip here by Team D as he gets the tank gets hit by one of the shells, unfortunately, but does not get punted on the outside of the arena. Certainly don't want that to happen, else the kind of ongoers and onlookers of the area will throw rotten food on you, which does a fair amount of damage and debuffs you for a while.
Yeah, we see Battle of Champion here pulling a bunch of mobs here as Ludwig dropped very low. Now Ludwig dies and he actually bolsters these mobs here, so they were still pretty high and all of them are going to be bolstered. So a little bit inefficient focus target damage here from Battle for Champion coming in. As Team D is done with Ludwig, they're on their way to pull the next trash, and this is a time where Team D can actually catch up a little bit compared to Battle for Champ, because we've seen them do this dungeon before against Buff Warrior Rogue, and they just had a very efficient arena pull pattern, basically. So now that they're dealing with this, they're also going to use their Bloodlust for Trothak later with the Reaping, and we're going to have to see what Battle for Champion does here.
Yeah, both teams certainly looking to pop their fourth Reaping Wave into Trothak, as we see here for Battle for Champion does just that and drags everything over, cleaving it down. Now the large lost soul there is the one of Ludwig von Tortolan that will live for quite a while. We do know that Reaping mobs spawn with 50% base health of their original mob. Von Tortolan being one of the mini boss mobs will take a while to cleave down, but will die well before Trothak does, so won't be any concern there. Team D, just as predicted by Nagura, brings the fourth Reaping Wave right on top of Trothak and pops that Bloodlust, something they will of course now not have available for the remainder of the dungeon, but Battle for Champion will have that advantage depending on who comes out first from Trothak.
Yeah, so Battle for Champ, of course, being ahead in boss HP just because they pulled it so much earlier. Now, Team D might be able to catch up a little bit because of this Bloodlust. Now, we see most of the teams actually save their Bloodlust for last boss, but because you can't really get any efficiency from pulling mobs on top, I think it doesn't matter that much if you pop it here or if you pop it on the last fight. It's really not a big difference. It just depends on whenever you have most of your cooldowns ready from the DPS to make sure it's get as much damage out of the Bloodlust as possible. So I don't think it's gonna put Team D too far behind from this Bloodlust usage, but if you look at the boss HP, they're still behind.
They're, yeah, a fair bit behind, 15%. They just can't seem to close the gap on this, even with that Bloodlust right now. Battle for Champion just looking so rock solid. Hopefully they don't have a deja vu of some of the hiccups they had at the end of the dungeon, which we are starting to approach. One of the Sharks slamming down right now on the Prot Warrior tank as he runs through the chum, making sure to try and kite the Shark through it. But of course, the Shark will pick the closest proximity target every time it hops. Does redirect to the healer, but eventually Trothak runs over and picks it up as Team D dealing with their own round of Shark tornadoes, starting to close the gap a bit, and only 10% separating the teams now instead of 15, but likely second round of cooldowns are starting to come up for these teams.
Yeah, so actually checked the talents a little bit from the rest of druids here coming in, because as I said earlier, they just tend to use Tree of Life for all of the dungeons. But this time around, Jack actually, interestingly enough, chose to play Soul of the Forest, but didn't choose to play the Double Swiftman, so no Prosperity here. So very, very interesting choice coming out of Jack. I mean, it seems to be working for him as they're ahead in this dungeon, but it's just very interesting choices coming out in talents here from both of those rest of druids.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to see that they're adapting to the different maps as opposed to just kind of blindly picking something they're comfortable with. That might not be the best match for these dungeons. Still about 9-10% separating the two teams right now as Battle for Champion gets to the single digit of health percent on Trothak. 6% now on the board for them. Team D looking to catch up, starting to close that gap just a bit. Likely another round of cooldowns has come up for them as Trothak reaches 10%. But Battle for Champion downing Trothak here in just a moment, and they will quickly mount up and start making their way to the bridge across in order to cross it and get to Harlan's Suite, the final boss of the dungeon.
Yeah, Team D needs to catch up here as Battle for Champion are already on their way to the last room, and Team D is also behind in trash a little bit, while they are on 80% and Battle for Champion on 83%. Now, Battle for Champ is probably going to skip the trash first and then kill the boss, use their Bloodlust, and then come back and clean up the rest of the trash later on, which we've seen Team D do before as well. As we can see the double CC coming out here. Now, okay, I changed my mind. They're actually pulling the trash here. Now, these are the double Ravagers, which just kind of kill themselves with this painful motivation. This is why we see them just kind of splitting up the pool into two, because the Ravagers use it on themselves and then two more mobs, and it stacks on the same mob, so you want to make sure that they're spread out so they don't buff it on the same mob twice.
I like what I see here from Battle for Champion. The Pro Warrior just kind of waits there until the last second. The mobs are about to enrage and then just dips right out, making sure that not too much damage is incurred, not only from the enraging, but the painful motivation, as mentioned, does increase the mob's damage by 45% as well. So Battle for Champion grabbing Harlan's Suite and grabbing that Bloodlust as well, as it's popped right off the bat. 93% on the board for them. They're likely going to bring in the remaining trash pack of the 2 Enforcer, 2 Mastiffs, and 2 Casters right in front of the boss once Harlan's Suite is about to die with the final Cannon Barrage to try and nail that down. Team D, 96% as well, has pulled Harlan's Suite, but just don't have the availability of Bloodlust as they use it on Trothak. Honestly, Nagura, not too much avail. It really didn't seem to provide them that much advantage.
Yeah, not really at all. Now, Battle for Champ, of course, using this Bloodlust here to get into the damage increase of the boss faster, because Harlan's Suite, if he gets 60% and 30%, he respectively gains more damage, meaning that, of course, the faster you get into this range, the more damage you're going to do. This is why we see the Bloodlust being popped at the very start here. Now, other than that, this boss fight really not so dangerous at all, because both Raging and Bolstering does not affect this boss in any sort of way. So you don't really have to deal with anything extra. All you have to do is want to make sure you deal with the base mechanics of the boss fight, and those kind of teams really shouldn't have a problem with that at all.
Jack doing well there to entangle the Grenadiers that pop down in the fight and try to run towards the player and explode for a fair amount of damage, so you can easily keep them at bay with a Druid's entangling roots, which of course doesn't have a cooldown, so you just want to make sure you keep them out. Harlan's Suite now at 55% has entered phase 2 for Battle for Champion, where he will just multiply his abilities on everyone in the group except for the Prot Warriors. So there's going to be a 360 degree on Slicing Wind and 4 rounds of cannons going out, something that's actually key and important that Battle for Champion will be using in order to kill the nearby trash. They're looking to get to that 30%. That's where the boss really melts, with 100% increased damage taken, and also increases his attack speed by 100%, but not really too dangerous for the tanks.
I just want to mention just how good and how close those two teams are to each other. Team D and Battle for Champ just shown in all of those dungeons just how good they're playing, how good their strategies are, how consistent they are too. Just both of those teams having 0 death throughout this tyrannical bolstering and raging dungeon, which is definitely something very difficult. So just shout out to both of those teams doing so well, and they can definitely compete or be compared to the Western region teams. And I think both of them just showing that they're world-class teams here.
Yeah, certainly they can hang with the best in the West, as Jack likes to say. Battle for Champion now entering the burn phase here for Harlan Sweet, looking to slowly and surely soon move over to the remaining trash of the Enforcers that is nearby on Harlan Sweet with their upcoming cannon barrages. But they want to make sure not to pull that too early. You don't want to bolster the boss because that is an immense amount of health that you will bolster, and honestly, that amount of damage could one-shot them. Here we go, though. Harlan Sweet 15%, melting quickly as they're waiting for the final cannon barrage to hit them down. Grenadier is CC'd on the side, but does break into the group slightly. Unfortunately, no explosions, no deaths. Harlan Sweet goes down before the cannon barrage hits, so they don't manage to get too much benefit from it. 14% on the board for Team D, though.
Yeah, so if they manage to do something wrong here and they have a death or two, then Team D can still catch up. But we can see the Enforcers just being so bolstered, and we see Jack being in cat form, trying to finish off this last percentage here, as they only have to kill his support. And there we go, Battle for Champion winning the East Cup too.
Very impressive performance here by Battle for Champion, finally taking their mantle as champions here away from Team D. And the head-to-head games against them are now tied 2-2 here, Sours.
This is also exciting because now these two teams are tied in point standings going into the third week, so it'll be really interesting to see which Chinese team or which East region team happens to squeeze out the first seed going into the first land. This really incredible game. 0 deaths from both teams in a grand finals in the third game. Just a couple of seconds between the two teams. Exactly what you want to see out of a game, out of a series that goes to 3 games. Team D was just a little bit slower on the first boss, full 35 seconds behind Battle for Champion. And Battle for Champion's routing was a lot different than Team D throughout the dungeon, where they were even pulling these mobs into a boss where the risk of bolstering any boss is always dangerous, but their route included. And Team D, you see, has much lower kill count immediately following the second boss, 40% compared to the 57% of Battle for Champion. But that didn't matter at all because both teams ended up getting to be around the exact same kill count by the time they got to Trothak. 3% count difference as opposed to 17% count difference. So a lot of time was made up between the second and third boss, but Battle for Champion clutched it out at the end. They weren't really able to take full advantage of that cannon barrage. I just poorly timed it, but they didn't bolster the boss, which is more important, and they won, which is the most important thing of all.
And actually, the most important thing of everything is I was right.
He was right. Sloot was right.
Sloot was right.
Sloot was right because he wanted to prove Nagura wrong, and then he was right. That's history. That's poetry.
And I know the topic that we're going to have on our ride home today. But as we take a look at our brackets, we are seeing a Battle for Champion being the champions here and taking it from Team D after getting knocked down into the lower final by those same opponents. So very satisfying. It's got to be an amazing feeling for them going into this. They are constantly battling up against this one team here, and at this point we're having such an even matchup going into this one, Nagura, where unlike the West, where Method EUs just always kind of come out ahead of other teams, this one looks very even for these top two.
Yeah, I'm super excited for the third cup now, just to see what happens there, because both of those teams are showing how good they are and just increasing or improving their strategies rather from the first cup to the second, and just neck-on-neck matches where they're both in the upper finals, one of the teams getting knocked into the lower final, and then both of them again in the grand final. So just very interesting to see those two teams play it out.
Yeah, at this point, it was an exact reversal in roles for these teams there. 1 week, Team D gets knocked down, they take the championship. This time, Battle for Champion gets knocked down, they take the championship on this one. So if only there were 4 weeks, Sours, so we could just constantly have these tiebreaker games and these sudden elimination ones.
Well, I mean, this means that Team D wins next weekend, right? Or 2 weekends from now.
We'll have to see on that one.
Only if Sloot is rooting for them.
That's right.
True.
Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue coming up, snaking up from the third place to snag first.
I would love to see that.
Me too. That would actually be, that'd be amazing.
They're the team that we want to be able to see next up. But taking a look at our standings for the week, after all of these points are kind of coming in together, Team D and Battle for Champion are tied up at that 240 points. Before Nerf Rogue at 140, and a company barely holding on to that 4th place spot at 120, because Black Mamba is not too far behind, though. But interesting to be able to see on this side of Western region. We got 40K, Pua Luka tied, and then Learn to Fly not too far off here. I like I love being able to see, as we're looking at who's going to land here, what we're going to be expecting from these ones, because next week, Salute, we're going to be going back to the West, and Pualuka Learn to Fly 40K. Spotlight's going to be on them.
Yeah, that mid-region of the West Cup's going to be a pretty big deal. First, we have to see how the time trials kind of play out in the first place, but that's going to be really tight for them. And even, I mean, to a certain extent, vying for that top spot as well. You know, Method EU certainly showed that they were human last week in quite many situations. So Method NA certainly taking to them. I know Abracadabra wasn't particularly impressed with their performance. They were very self-critical about it, and they know they can do better. So it's going to be a big cup in the West next week.
Without a doubt. And thank you so much for joining us here for the Eastern Cup number 2. Be sure to join us next week for the 3rd cup for the West here, as we're going to be seeing it, like you mentioned, if we're going to be seeing Method EU be human and who will be taking those spots for LAN. Again, it's going to be top 4 spots going into LAN here. And after an amazing Eastern weekend of fails and successes, we are seeing Battle for Champion finally taking home their championship and now tying it up in points for LAN with Team D here. Be sure to join us next week as we recap the final week for the Western region and also finalizing who's going to be going to LAN for those. This has been the Mythic Dungeon International. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone, and have a great night.